My name is Eli Ranger Yazi. I was born and raised on Navajo land, and for 6 years I worked as a field ranger, assigned to some of the most remote stretches of reservation boundary you can imagine. These are lands that don't see regular traffic, where you can walk for hours and never hear another human voice, where the silence itself starts to feel alive. I tell you this because what I'm about to share is not hearsay, not something I read in a book or heard as a child. This happened to me. And when I say that I should have died out there, I mean it with every bone in my body. But I didn't. It didn't kill me, because whatever I encountered that night wanted something else. The memory comes back in pieces. The sound of brush snapping under my boots, my own ragged breath cutting through the night air, the sting of branches clawing at my arms as I ran. Behind me, and somehow also ahead of me, a voice called my name. My name. From 2 directions at once. I stopped cold, not because I wanted to, but because my legs refused to move. The silence that followed was heavier than thunder, pressing into my skull. That's where the story really begins. I had been dispatched to investigate reports coming out of a small outpost near the Badlands, far on the edge of tribal land. Ranchers were losing livestock, fences were found shredded apart, and several families had heard sounds in the night. Animal cries that didn't match anything we knew. Coyotes? Maybe. Mountain lions? Possible. But none of them moved the way people described. Some said it sounded like a man coughing, mixed with a dog's whine. Others swore they heard footsteps circling their homes, but when they opened the door, nothing was there. I didn't head out there with fear in my mind. My job was to document, to patrol, to protect. I drove out under a pale sliver of moonlight, tires crunching over dirt roads until I reached the ranger cabin. It was a lonely little structure, tucked into the scrub, 100 yards from the nearest wash. That night, crickets chirped. The desert wind slid past the rocks. Nothing felt out of place. But when I stepped out of the truck, a strange weight pressed on me. You know that feeling when you're being watched? It was like that, but stronger, as though the air itself was aware of me. I tried to shake it off. Inside the cabin, I unpacked my gear. I heard my own breath, the faint scrape of gravel under my boots, and then movement behind me. I spun, flashlight beam jittering across brush and rock. Nothing. The silence deepened, stretching taut like a wire. I whispered a small prayer, one my grandmother used to say under her breath when storms gathered. And then, clear as day, I heard a voice call out. Eli! It was my partner's voice, the one I patrolled with last summer. A voice I knew, but he wasn't there. No one was. I froze. My throat went dry. I called back, "Who's out there?" The night gave me nothing in return, just silence. The next day I spoke with locals, a medicine woman with sharp eyes that looked straight through me, a rancher whose face was lined from decades of desert sun, a teenager who couldn't stop glancing at the horizon while we talked. They all told me pieces of the same story without saying the word outright. Something was moving out there. Something that wore shapes. Something that could sound like the people you loved. I listened. I nodded. But I told myself there had to be an explanation. Tracks, predators, maybe even people playing games. That night I went back to the fence. I carried with me a motion-sensing camera and a small recorder. I set them up, scanning the dirt with every step, and then I waited. Hours passed. Crickets. The occasional bark of a far-off dog. Then, at exactly 11:47, I heard it. Breathing. Not mine. Not animal either. Shaky, wet breaths. Too close. I swept my flashlight across the brush. For a split second, the beam caught a face. Human eyes. But the shape was all wrong. The head tilted at an angle no neck should allow. And then, it moved. Not ran. Not walked. It shifted. Bones reconfiguring. A body folding into a new frame. I stumbled back, heart hammering. My light flickered. When it steadied again, the thing was gone. But the smell lingered. A burning stench, like hair singed by flame, mixed with something rotten. I knew I wasn't alone anymore. The days that followed blurred. I didn't sleep more than an hour at a time. Every time I closed, I was by the broken fence again, camera in hand, the flashlight shaking from the tremor in my fingers. Midnight passed, then 1 o'clock. Then silence fell in a way I'd never heard before. The crickets stopped. Even the wind seemed to retreat. I heard the twigs snap. And then it stepped into view. The moonlight touched it, and for a breath I thought I was looking at myself. Same face, same build, but wrong. The eyes were hollow, black voids swallowing light. The mouth curved too wide. My reflection, but stripped of humanity. It lifted a hand, slowly, and beckoned. My voice cracked as I asked, "What do you want?" It tilted its head, and in a voice that was almost mine, it whispered, "You know." That was when I understood. It didn't want to kill me. It wanted me to join it, to open the way wider, to become like it. I ran. I didn't look back. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but I didn't stop until I slammed the cabin door behind me and locked it. Through the window there was nothing, just the wide, empty dark. At dawn I packed my gear. I didn't call it in. I didn't explain. I just loaded water, maps, and what little courage I had left, and I drove. My ATV tore across the dirt, tires biting deep. The whole time I felt its eyes on me. Half a mile out, I made the mistake of looking in the mirror. There it was, standing at the tree line, perfectly still, watching. It didn't chase. It didn't need to. I left the land that morning, but it never truly left me. Even now, years later, when I hike alone, I feel it. At night, sometimes I hear the faintest footsteps outside my window. Sometimes I wake to the sound of my own voice calling my name from the dark. I should have died that night, but it didn't kill me. It wanted something else. And if you ever find yourself on those lands, under that same pale moonlight, with silence pressing in around you, remember this. If you hear a voice calling your name, don't answer. And whatever you do, don't stop walking. I wasn't just a ranger that year. I was also trying to capture the land with my camera. Long exposures of starlight, desert ridges outlined in silver. A friend of mine, a local hunter, had invited me to stay on his family's allotment for a few nights. He said it would give me the quiet I needed, a place to set up my tripod without the buzz of the highway or the glow of distant towns. So I went. The desert at night is a strange thing. People imagine it's alive with noise, owls, insects, coyotes. And sometimes it is. But out there, far from the paved roads, the silence comes heavy. The air cuts cold after sundown, colder than you'd think for desert ground. My breath came out in long, fogging trails. Above me, the stars burned so fiercely it felt like I could reach out and scrape them with my fingers. There were so many they pressed against the sky, a million eyes staring back. I thought it was perfect. Stillness, beauty, everything I wanted my photographs to capture. But the people who lived there, my friend's family, they didn't talk about beauty when the sun went down. They talked about rules. The first night, his uncle told me straight, "Don't whistle after dark. Don't answer if you hear your name, even if it sounds like someone you love, especially if it sounds like someone you love." I laughed a little at first, the way outsiders do when they hear warnings wrapped in old voices. I'd grown up with stories, sure, but I thought I knew the difference between folklore and fact. I shrugged it off. That night, I set up my tripod on the ridge and told myself the only thing out there with me was silence and stars. But the land has a way of reminding you, you're never truly alone. The second night, I wandered farther from the cabin with my camera. I wanted a better angle of the ridgeline, the kind of shot where the Milky Way arches perfectly overhead. My boots crunched on gravel. Every step echoed just a little too long in the empty air. After a while, I noticed something strange. No matter where I went, there was another sound, faint but steady. Footsteps. At first, I thought it was just the echo bouncing back from the canyon walls. But then I stopped. The sound didn't. One more step in the brush, then another, pacing me, just far enough away to stay hidden. I turned my flashlight toward the mesquite thickets. My voice cracked as I called, "Who's out there?" Silence. Then, clear as if someone stood right beside me, I heard it. My own voice, tossed back at me from the dark. The same tone, the same words. I felt the ground tilt beneath me. My throat tightened. I backed up slowly, every instinct screaming to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. Later that night, when I told my friend what happened, his expression hardened. He didn't smile. He didn't joke. He only said one thing. "You shouldn't have spoken to it." I asked what he meant. He wouldn't answer. He just shook his head and told me not to go out alone again. The tension in the house grew heavier after that. The dogs that usually roamed the yard, loud and eager, refused to step outside after sundown. They stayed pressed against the doors, whining low in their throats. Their ears pinned back, eyes locked on the windows as if something waited in the dark. And every time I tried to convince myself it was just nerves, just imagination, the memory of my own voice calling back to me crawled up my spine. I woke up sometime after midnight to a sound like nails dragging against wood. Slow, deliberate scratches moving along the thin cabin walls. For a moment, I thought I was still dreaming. But then it came again. Scrape, 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 right by the window. The dogs inside the house had already slunk under the table, trembling, their eyes fixed on the door. My heart pounded in my throat. The night outside was blacker than ink. The stars were gone, hidden behind a thick cloud cover that hadn't been there an hour before. I eased off the cot, every board creaking like a gunshot, and crept toward the window. When I parted the curtain, I saw it. A figure crouched in the dirt just beyond the porch, arms and legs folded like a spider, jerky little twitches rippling up its back. Its head lolled from side to side in broken rhythm, as though its neck had too many joints. It was digging its fingers into the earth, scooping handfuls of dust, sniffing it, letting it fall. Then it stilled. Slowly, painfully, it began to rise. Its bones cracked as it unfolded itself into the shape of a man. And when it turned toward the cabin, I saw my friend's face staring back at me. But his limbs were wrong. His shoulders sloped downward at impossible angles, elbows bent backward like a grasshopper's. His mouth hung open wider than it should have been, lips trembling around teeth that weren't quite teeth. I stumbled back from the window, hand clamped over my mouth to stop a gasp. It leaned closer, pressing its forehead to the glass. In a low, rasping whisper, it said, "Come out. We're the same now." The power flickered. The single bulb above the table popped, plunging the cabin into a dim, sickly glow from my battery lantern. The air grew thick and heavy, like trying to breathe underwater. Then came the smell, sharp copper, like blood on pennies, mixed with something rotted, wet and ancient. I couldn't move. The dogs began to howl, a thin, keening sound. And outside, my friend's face grinned at me from a body that wasn't human, whispering again and again, "Come out. Come out." I don't remember choosing to move. My body just took over. One moment I was frozen by that window, the next I was shoving open the back door and sprinting into the night. The desert air knifed into my lungs, each breath sharp and burning as I tore across the sand and scrub. I thought if I could just put distance between us, I'd be safe. But distance meant nothing. The first sound that followed me wasn't footsteps. It was a cry, thin, broken, like someone in pain. A man calling for help, voice ragged and desperate. I slowed without meaning to. My chest heaved as I strained to hear. It was my friend's voice again. Then, from another direction, the same cry, louder, clearer. I spun in circles, flashlight beams shaking, catching nothing but dust and brush. That's when I realized the sound wasn't bouncing, it was imitating. I pushed harder, running toward the ridge. Gravel spilled beneath my boots, but behind me, silence. Absolute silence. No footfalls, no rustle of grass. Somehow it was following without a sound, covering ground faster than me. At one point, I risked a glance back, and that's when I saw them. Not one, two. One crouched low to the earth, its arms braced like an animal about to spring. Its head jerked in sharp, staccato motions, sniffing, listening. The other stood upright, tall, almost human in shape, watching me with the stillness of a shadow carved in stone. Their faces were blurred by distance, but the way they moved, it froze every thought in my mind. I veered off the trail, scrambling down a wash until I found a shallow overhang of rock. I dropped beneath it, chest pressed to the dirt, trying to silence my breath. My heart hammered so loud I thought the stone itself would give me away. The night held still. Then, softly, gravel shifted above me. It was there. I saw its outline against the starlight, head tilted back, nostrils flaring. It was sniffing, pulling the air into itself like a predator savoring the scent of prey. My body locked rigid, every muscle screaming not to move. And then, it leaned close to the rocks above me. So close I could hear the scrape of its teeth as it whispered, in my own voice, "Trade." I pressed my face into the dirt under that overhang, fists clenched so tight my nails cut my palms. My whole body trembled. I waited for claws, for teeth, for an end. But none came. Instead, its voice slid down through the stones like a cold wind. My voice, but lower, drawn out, echoing in a way no throat could manage. Trade. It let the word hang there until my heart nearly stopped. Then, with a sound like dry leaves turning, it whispered again. Not your flesh. Not your breath. Another pause. The air around me grew so heavy it hurt to inhale. I could smell it, copper and rot, burned sage and something sour pressing against my skin. Then, clear as a bell, the words came. Tell them about me. Speak my name. Make them afraid. Every syllable crawled into my ears like insects. It didn't want my body. It wanted my story. It wanted to be carried past these canyons, into mouths and minds that had never heard it. It wanted to live through fear, through me. I lay frozen, eyes squeezed shut, until the weight of the air shifted. The smell receded. I opened my eyes just enough to see a shadow slipping back into the brush, moving in broken jerks until it was gone. Gone without a single footfall. For a heartbeat, the desert stayed silent, like it was holding its breath. Then, from the cabin far behind me, the dogs began to howl, long, shuddering cries that broke the stillness like glass. Only after it had gone. I left at first light. I didn't wait to explain, didn't stop to gather the last of my gear. My hands shook so badly I could barely start the truck, and when the engine finally caught, I drove until the land itself fell away in the rearview mirror. I never went back, not once. But leaving the reservation didn't end it. If anything, that was just the beginning. Because after I came home, after I started telling this story, quietly at first, to friends, to family, something began to happen. People would call me the next day, their voices low, uncertain. They'd say they heard something at night, a scratching at their window, nails dragging against the wood of their doors. Sometimes a whisper, faint but clear, calling their name. And I realized the truth far too late. It didn't need my body. It didn't need to kill me. All it wanted was my tongue, my story, my voice carrying it forward. So if you've made it this far, if you're listening right now, maybe that was the trade. Now it knows you too. Silence. Then, faint and broken, just beyond the speakers, your name.